Monani. Today I'm going to be doing a wrap up of all the books that I read in January. I started off this year with a bang, which was The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. This is set in Lorain, Ohio, and follows Piccola, a young black girl who is severely affected by the colorism directed towards her by her community. As a result of this consistent hatred towards her, Piccola wishes that she had blue eyes, which are a standard of white beauty. And in this book, we have multiple narrator, and the majority of the book is narrated by Claudia, who is Piccola's foster sister, as well as one of the few people who is kind to Piccola. And Claudia has a slightly older sister called Frida, and the other narrators in the book is Charlie and Pauline, who are Piccola's parents, who also abuse and neglect her a lot, and specifically physical abuse as well as obviously emotional abuse. And we have Mr. Henry and a third narrator who is unnamed and has just like this unsettling presence because this third narrator speaks in the first voice, so they're not really active within the story. This book completely unraveled me, to be honest, and I wasn't expecting to be moved so early in the year, and I'm very appreciative of how transformative the writing is and how much it explores the loneliness of childhood as well as just black girlhood. What I find so interesting about the book as well is just the contrast between Claudia as well as Piccola, because Piccola is obviously growing up in an abusive home, whereas Claudia is reassured by her family and as a result has a stronger self-worth compared to Piccola. We see this, for example, when Claudia is gifted white dolls and she's kind of really annoyed and upset about this decision from her parents, and she chucks those dolls out. She also rejects white standards of beauty and whiteness as a whole, because you see her sometimes pinching or fighting the white kids in her neighborhood. So just like seeing that contrast of what it means to be assured and not consistently hated is always such a poignant thing to notice in a book. What I also just loved about I think in all books exploring colorism that I've read so far, like if they're written well, let me say, I really love how the self-loathing of the character, the authors don't blame them. So Piccola, as a result of like the hatred and the colorism, obviously is going to develop like self-hatred, because she's being constantly suppressed and she's constantly having to meet these ideals, like white supremacist ideals in her everyday life. And this is not to say that racism doesn't affect the other characters, because it plays a huge role in the entire book. Because what I also just really loved was that Toni Morrison humanized Charlie as well as Pauline, despite how abusive they were, by going back to when they were children and how they came to be these parents that they are, and also just complicated the narrative of love, because we think of love as something that's pure, but like people can love you in a way that you can reject, but like to them that is still love. And yeah, I just appreciate this book so much. And following, and while I was reading it, I was also just watching interviews by Toni Morrison, and she spoke about being a fastidious reader, and that's something, those are like my main aspirations for this year, that I want to be pay more attention to detail in the books that I read, as well as I catch every single subtext in the text that I read. Yeah, following The Bluest Eye, I read Milkman by Anna Burns. This is set in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, which occurred in the late 1960s to the late 1990s, and it follows a middle sister who is 18 years old and is being harassed and stalked by Milkman. her first brother-in-law starts this rumor that she is having an affair with Milkman, who is married and like 57 years old, and it spreads like wildfire throughout her whole entire community, which is controlled by the Irish nationalists who are repressors of the state. And to explain or give some context to the Troubles, this was, as I mentioned, a period between the 1960s to the 1990s where Northern Ireland nationalists wanted to form a united Ireland, and whereas defenders of the state wanted it to just remain being the way that things were. And of course, Britain was involved because they're always involved in like people's business. So like we have like numerous actors here, and the in the book no one has a name. Essentially everyone is named according to their roles in society or birth order. So for example, middle sister is the middle sister. We have Milkman, who is not a milkman and but like one of the prominent paramilitaries in this region, and he has a lot of power which he uses to surveil and like go on about the stalking middle sister. We have maybe boyfriend, who is middle sister's boyfriend, but because they're not exclusive they go by the title maybe boyfriend or maybe girlfriend. I This book left me astounded because it's so good and it's written brilliantly. I read a review on the storybook, and the person was saying that if this book is like someone who reads something but can't, they form their thoughts after a while, because it's like very stream of consciousness and it's told from the future, and the narrator is reflecting on the past. And I love that because I'm one of those people who starts a point and sometimes does not know where it's going, or does know where it's going, and I get to that point, but there's like different lanes before I get to that point, basically. And I just really love the stream of consciousness and how Anna Burns explored surveillance, rape culture, and like surveillance culture, because men watch, or abusers watch, how people behave. And obviously this is during a very violent period in Ireland, and everyone is like fearful and everyone's trying to adhere to the established norms. No one's trying to be different. To be different, you are going to be punished. And middle sister engages in something that sets her apart from the rest of the community, which is reading while walking. And that is how the rumor kind of like came about, as was the fact that her first brother-in-law was just a bastard and a very rapey person. What I also appreciated about this book is that it explored the women's role during like violent periods in time, and because most history just always is focused on the men, and without like kind of questioning how things were like gender wise or sexuality wise. And yeah, it does, and it does it so brilliantly. I made so many markings in it because I'm going to reread it in the future. And then the third book that I read is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I listened to this and it was narrated by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and it's basically exploring themes of mental illness as well as white patriarchy towards suburban white women. And we're following here Esther Greenwood, who at the beginning of the book gains an internship at a very prestigious New York magazine. There she gains a lot of experiences, and at some point has a very traumatic sexual experience because there's a specific man who tries to harm her. Following New York, she goes home and her dreams are immediately dashed when she gets home to Boston, when she learns that she did not get into the writing programs that she hoped she would get, and she starts getting like a mental breakdown because she based her whole value and her whole identity in academic excellence. And now that she couldn't like fulfill her dreams, things start crashing. Thereon, she meets a psychiatrist who is awful, but like later on she meets another psychiatrist who's like a bit better, and slowly recovers. But like while she's still recovering, she has these very useful insights I found, that were just like talking about how you can get it better, but like I could relapse anytime, and I could be in this bell jar. And yeah, I also just really loved how the book explored psychiatry as a whole, and how harmful that institution is, because when we think about therapy, we think all lovey-dovey and like positive thoughts most of the time, when the opposite can occur. And like psychiatric hospitals have been so harmful to so many people over so many years. And yeah, I didn't really enjoy this book. I always felt compelled to read it, but I never did, and I did finally this year. I just found the character to be very judgmental. I could, as I mentioned, I found her insights about mental illness very useful, but and the writing, I mean, it's decent. I thought that it had too many metaphors though, and similes, and it was just like overwrought with those. And I was just like, Sylvia Plath or whoever edited this book needed to tone it down. The book, fourth book that I'm reading, like halfway, is The Day of the Duchess, Scandal and Scoundrel by Sarah MacLean. This is a romance book, and it follows Sarah and Malcolm, who are in a very tumultuous point in their relationship. There were some traumatic things, and there's obviously miscommunication happening, because this is a romance. And basically, Sarah arrives back from where she was in America for 3 years, and Malcolm had thought that she'd been missing, or worse, dead. And she comes back and requests a divorce from Malcolm because she wants to gain independence and open her own tavern. Malcolm, in his efforts to win her back, but like without telling her, is like, I'll give you a divorce under the conditions that you'll help me find my next wife. And Sarah agrees, and so we kind of like in that whole process at the moment, and I'm loving it. It's bringing me so much joy because I love romance, and it's so angsty. And yeah, I find it sexy as well. I think I've only read two of Sarah MacLean's books, The Bare Knuckle Bastards, which comes after this book. I read only the first two though. I wasn't interested in the third one. And I just really love how she explores women's desires, because that's something that I haven't seen from other romance authors, but I'm like still exploring. And then another book that's like on my to go top list for this month is Cindy Omakona's Living, Loving and Lying Awake at Night. I'm really excited for this because I absolutely adored Mother to Mother, and I think that is one of just the best books that I read last year. So yeah, if you have read any of the books that I have spoken about, do let me know, and we'll chat in the comment section, or I think my email address is somewhere on this channel. And yeah, or if you want to chat about any other thing, you can. I will see you when I see you. Goodbye.